Okay, I think we are live. Hello, how's it going? Today is Wednesday, March 19th, and my tea is hot. Um, I am working on the design for this self-portrait painting, which you can kind of see over here on my easel. Um, and today, what I wanted to do is share some of my digital composition process. Let me just get situated here. It's been a while since I've been on camera for a live stream, so I just had to rearrange a couple things here on my streaming software. And today I'm excited because this will be the first time that I'm using my iPad as part of my presentation. So what I'm planning to do is work on some compositional stuff. I'd like to try and sketch in a thistle subject into the hand, hoping that I can get to a point in the digital reference that I can just paint from whatever I come up with today into the actual painting. So before I started the live stream, I took a really nice picture of the painting. I think some of the levels of values and maybe some of the saturation is probably not perfect. Doesn't really matter. I just wanted a high quality reference where, you know, if I zoom in, we'll be able to see a lot more of the small details in the painting. And the imagery that I've been using for my phone just really isn't that high quality. So I'm hoping that this can kind of help us as we're zooming in and working in this part of the design of the painting. So the program that I'm using today is called Autodesk Sketchbook, and the version that I have is free. I've been using this software for probably 10 years now at this point. I used to have one of those Amazon Fire tablets that were like $45. They were super cheap, and the version of Autodesk at the time was also free, but the resolution on those tablets was super low quality, and it worked for what I needed it for at the time. And then back in 2017, or no, man, I can't remember now, maybe 2020, 2021, somewhere between those 2 years, I got an iPad, and I've been using Autodesk on the iPad ever since. And with the Apple Pencil, it's become a really useful tool. I don't use it as frequently as I probably should. And it's, you know, it's a fairly small, it's not the Pro, it's a kind of a smaller version of the iPad. But I'm constantly dealing with my memory filling up on the device. So that's probably part of the reason why I don't often use it. But for today, because I'm at this point in the process of making my painting where I can show you, you know, I've been thinking about this idea of adding in a thistle. Here's just a quick look at some recent sketches for the frame of the painting, which is something that I've also recently made some progress on. If you want to view some of the woodworking process that I did yesterday, if you go to my YouTube channel, you should be able to see my recent post that I put up today. I put up some pictures of the frame building process yesterday out in my wood shop in our garage. I'm pretty happy with the way the frame is turning out so far. But today, you know, I thought I would kind of switch things up and work digitally, talk about some of the process in, you know, finishing up the painting. I'm getting really close, I think, on a lot of areas. This is an area that I think is really starting to come together. These little red marks, and you can kind of see a bit better now the amount of paint that I had in that little corner just from this photo. But today, you know, I have my layers over on the right side over here, And with the pencil, I can just create new layers and draw right on top of what I'm looking at. One thing, though, that I want to do is talk a little bit about the... hang on one sec. Let me just turn down the Spotify music. So if I go to this page... So one of the things that I've been really thinking a lot about putting into the painting is a musk thistle. And part of the reason why I'm drawn to this as a subject is because it's an invasive species to Wisconsin. I think it originated from Europe, but it's a plant that I remember seeing in the yard where, my family and I lived for the majority of my upbringing in southeast Wisconsin, in Bristol, Wisconsin. And, just like a quick background story of this plant. My siblings and my mom and I, we lived on this piece of rural farm property just outside of Kenosha, Wisconsin for, I think, like 15, 16 years or so, maybe longer. Yeah, I mean, actually probably like 20 years. And when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, I remember we used to get a ton of these thistle plants in our front pasture. So our house was off of a pretty busy county road, and to the left of our driveway we had about an acre of just like prairie farm field, kind of a front pasture where that was attached to the main barn that we had on our property. And on the basement level of the barn, it opened out into this pasture. So we had sheep, goats, chickens, turkeys, pigs. And throughout the years growing up, especially early on, I remember these thistles being, a recurring problem. And for a couple of years in the summer, I remember my mom encouraging my siblings, my brother, my sister, and I to cut the heads off of these plants to prevent them from, repopulating and reseeding, because these like purple heads, as they start to age, they kind of start to dry out, and their seeds will eventually sort of like almost like a dandelion be blown out into the surrounding area, and then they'll come back the next year and start out with this base part of the plant, and then the second year they'll flower up and go through that whole process again of repopulating and reseeding themselves. And when I was like 8, 9, and 10 years old, my mom used to give us like a nickel per head, or like I don't remember how much. I think it was like 5 cents per head that we would cut off, and we'd have these like big gloves and clippers, and we would be out there with a wheelbarrow filling them up, or with big bags. And there's this like personal history and story that I have when I think about these types of thistles, and there's something formally about them that I'm really attracted to. I love the colors of these plants, especially the head. It has such a rich vibrancy of magenta and purple and pink, but there's also this like really jagged sharpness to the plant as well, which we can see both in the like head part of the plant, but also in the stem of the plant as well. And so the idea kind of evolved from imagining a plant that just accidentally expanded my screen here. Let me move things around again. But the idea evolved from wanting to incorporate some sort of organic plant object and material into the painting, where maybe in my hand I could have this, like, I would be holding on to something. And if this is the first recording of this series in making my self-portrait painting, in earlier live streams I talked about whether or not I should have my hand in the painting be holding an object, and what that object should be. And it took a few sessions before the idea of roots or part of a plant kind of came to mind. So I started researching and brainstorming different types of plants that were native to Wisconsin. And I think just by searching that idea, on the flip side, I started thinking more about invasive species of plants. And, I was searching kind of in a narrow search of plants that were invasive to the state of Wisconsin, or maybe southeast Wisconsin where I grew up. And thistles were one of the top plants that I kept finding in these different lists. And then within thistles, there were a few different species that are present in the state of Wisconsin. And it took a while for me to figure out which type of thistle I remember cutting as a kid in our front yard, through that memory that I talked about a few minutes ago. And the musk thistle is one that I know for sure we used to get on our property. So I think this is the one that I'm going to reference as I work digitally today in Autodesk Sketchbook. And the idea really is not to just Photoshop a cropped, selection from an image online, but instead to look at these images on screen and then be drawing in a way that is a bit more imaginative and inventive, and really thinking about the placement and the scale, maybe even a sense of gesture to the plant. But given the overall feeling of my painting so far, there's definitely this kind of like scary or foreboding or kind of sense of looming threat and danger to that exterior red landscape, which I've talked quite a bit about in past live streams as well. And I kind of hinted at in other conversations that when I look at the painting, when I think about my interpretation of the painting, I'm very closely aware of this idea of the current political climate in the U.S. And, Elon Musk is one of these super influential people right now, whether you like his policies and his politics or not. I think there's an interesting kind of overlap in meaning in the invasiveness of the musk thistle and thinking about the current sort of political dynamics in the United States. So when I found those correlations, it made it really obvious and clear that that's the direction I wanted to go with the painting. So that's what I'm going to be working on. I know that was a really long introduction into today's session, but I appreciate all of the support that I've been receiving so far in this project. It's been a lot of fun to be able to share the process with everyone and document the majority of making this painting with you here live on YouTube. The one thing, obviously, that I haven't been sharing is the woodworking process. So just quickly here, I can go back into YouTube and show you the post that I'm talking about. So let's go back over here. So I'm on my YouTube page, and over in the posts part of my channel, earlier today, a few hours ago, I put up some images from yesterday's process in building out the frame. So this is where the frame is currently sitting at. Basically, it's a float frame with an extra like 8 inches along the bottom of the canvas, and in that space I decided to cut strips of black walnut wood and shape them into this like beveled siding kind of molding profile. So these are a few images from the process. This is that page that I showed a few minutes ago here on the live stream for my sketchbook. These are some of the initial concept sketches for building out the frame, and I just wanted to share a little bit of yesterday's progress with you. But I'm really excited about the direction of the painting with the frame. I feel like it's helping me see the vision and find the overall kind of sensation I want the painting to have. And seeing something that's been in the back of my mind for a few weeks in real materials physically here in my studio is a really rewarding process. So we'll see how that turns out. It's really hard to see, especially probably at this scale, but at the very bottom left part of this image, there is a corner of a painting in my wife and I, in our collection, our very humble art collection of artwork from friends and artists that I really admire. There's a very small painting that I purchased from the artist Turner Vinson a few months ago, and in the last week I built a custom little walnut float frame for it, and yesterday I did the final coat of the finish, which was like a wax hand buffed finish. You can kind of see a little bit of the frame here, but just to show you the shift in color and value that this wood will end up having, it's going to be a lot darker and warmer, and it'll look a lot more like this color here in the photograph. So I just wanted to share that with you. But like I said, while I'm sketching today, I'm planning to keep the Google images up here of musk thistles. I'll be referring back to a bunch of these images. I really like this one here with the goldfinch, not necessarily because of the bird, but just the shapes of the plant in this image I think is going to be really helpful. One thing that I've already been preparing for and contemplating is having the flower be like upside down, so I'm holding it like if this was the pointy end of my pencil was the top of the plant, sort of like in this kind of a pose, where it's hanging downward. So that'll be something that I'm going to try to play with today. And originally I thought maybe I'll just live stream with paper and pencil, but if I have the tools and the technology to work directly over the image of my painting, that's probably going to help me a lot more efficiently than paper and pencil will. So yeah, that's the plan today. I'm going to go ahead and just start sketching. If anyone has questions or feedback while I'm working today, feel free to leave those down in the comments or in the chat if you're popping in while I'm live today. Okay, so let's see, let's find some references here. One of the things too that I didn't really talk about with the thistle plants, like most invasive species, they kind of come in and they take over, and they make it really challenging for other native plants to be present in those areas and those landscapes. And I kind of like that symbolism of invading in a way that prevents biodiversity, and so making some of those connections also has really helped me make sense of why this particular plant could be useful or really fitting for this painting that I'm working on. So, okay. So let's see, I'm just gonna start by zooming in here. Maybe I'll start by doing some drawing. If you've never used Autodesk Sketchbook, it's a really useful app. It's really easy to use compared to things like Photoshop. One of the other things I really like about it is that you can also download it for your phone or your laptop. So it ends up being a really helpful tool. Actually, let's go lighter here. A really helpful tool if you're just trying to do something really quick and not overly complicated, or for things like this where it's a lot more about the process. And maybe while I'm just kind of chatting still, why don't I, I'm tempted to make this a bit larger, and I'll bring, actually, I'll leave the video kind of like that. Okay. And why don't we bring the volume back up real quick too. So many ads. I'm just going to go through and save a few different images of the plant. This way I don't need to kind of keep going back and finding different files on Google. Something I was reading about a little bit yesterday with this particular, thistles, I think in general, that if you're trying to take them out of your yard or, prevent them from spreading, that you have to clip the heads off at a particular part of their growth and development. And once they sort of seed open in these like big round puff balls, I think at that point it's almost too late. Like some of the seeds might already have fallen off, but I'd have to go back and read that again. The reason I'm thinking about that is because I think it's going to factor into the way I understand the painting. Like if I'm painting the plant when it's really young, how does that affect the interpretation of the painting? versus something where it's like, oh, it's too late now to prevent this from spreading. I think that's a really interesting conversation to think about. Not that there's like a right or a wrong answer, but I think about it more like, how can I use that timeline to create a particular type of interpretation, you know, or really direct the meaning of the work. I have to sneeze. Okay, so now I'm going to go in and flip a bunch of these images upside down, because that's sort of the orientation of the flower in the painting. And I know that you can't see what I'm doing right now, but pretty soon here I'll get back into the digital painting. And there's two other images I just have to flip over. Okay, so let's expand a few of these. I wonder if maybe, I think I can bring in an image here. Let's see if I do this. So this is the image that I'm currently looking at right now. And I'll just kind of leave it there for right now. I know my screen is very chaotic at the moment, but I suppose what I could do is just put this down at the bottom. I don't know if I'll do this for every image that I'll be referencing, but this will at least give you an idea of what I'm looking at as I'm sketching into the painting. So let's zoom in here. So one of the things I need to figure out is like, what direction do I want the plant to face? Does it make sense for it to be facing like this way, like, and bringing the eye sort of down and around that bottom right corner of the design? Or, you know, should I have it face this direction? You know, these are things where it's like, at this stage I need to really be sensitive to the sense of movement that this symbol or that this form is going to bring into the logic of the whole painting. So So if I go back to this layer, and the other thing is scale. You know, I think if it's a really large flower, how does that start to interact with the scale of the body and the figure and the hand? You know, I think we tend to look at something that is really out of scale or out of proportion, that's very large, as reading like being overwhelming or difficult to contain, difficult to hold, really powerful. So I think going big makes sense within the meaning of the work. So I'm going to try that. But the nice thing is that since I'm working digitally, it's really easy for me to change that scale of the object with this layer. So let's go darker. The other thing I need to think about is the lighting, because, you know, if the light source is kind of behind the hand coming from the window, clearly there's another light source hitting the front of the figure, so I can keep some of that front lighting anatomy, but I do want to try to have this line up with the logic of other areas in the painting. So I'm going to be somewhat, you know, trying to stay aware of some of those relationships in terms of the lighting. You know, but I can already start to imagine like the presence of this object in the painting. You know, and it's like how let's make this a little bit cooler.
Some people just know they can save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you gotta check the GPS directions.
I feel like there's more ads in this playlist than usual today. I feel like every other song has an ad.
Checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that can save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
So right now I'm really just trying to kind of figure out some of those big shapes and big color variations. Looking for various landmarks in the reference that I can pull out and use. I'm not really concerned about making something look super accurate necessarily. You know, it's more about like, how does this fit into the painting? And what we can also do, because I feel like it's getting a little bit too colorful, is, you know, we can take that saturation down. We can also play a little bit with the hue of this layer so far. You know, it's like if we wanted to look a little bit colder, that might be interesting if it's more like on the purple cool side of that palette. And we can also play with the scale. You know, if it's like a really small object, how does that change the feeling in the painting as opposed to something that's really, you know, out of scale. Or what if it's, you know, coming out at a different angle? We can also adjust. I don't like this because it ties into the shoulder of that middle figure a little bit too easily, and it kind of blocks out some of that space between the two portraits. So I think I'm going to probably keep it curled kind of in this direction, but I've been talking a lot about scale. It's like maybe the scale of this could be, you know, so large that it's out of frame. You know, it's kind of more of a design problem, like where does it make sense for the relationships in the painting? Oh yeah, my nose is, my allergies are kind of starting to get worked up here. Okay, I think I like where it's at here. You know, I think this kind of makes sense. I like the way that my eye travels throughout the painting, you know, so I feel like I look here and then, you know, my eye wants to move over to this area, then back over to this window, maybe following things back in this part of the composition, and then I think we're starting to spend more time over in this section as well. So what ends up happening is that we create this pattern of movement that is irregular and, you know, just has a more dynamic sense of movement. And the thing I'm really trying to think about is how this corner of this like trapezoid shape, how that corner relates in terms of its height in the painting and its width. You know, those relationships I have to really think about. And depending on the scale of the flower, that's going to change that feeling of movement, that feeling of constraint. Because right now, if I hide that layer, you know, right now this is such a small gap of negative space down here that we create this little channel for the eye to still move around this form. And if I make this smaller, all of a sudden it just has a very different effect, right? It starts to feel more open. It starts to feel less tense. Like we're not having to squeeze quite as much to be able to fit through the distance between two different things. So those are the types of decisions that, or like the types of effects from a decision that I have to really take into consideration, you know, because each little change in distance or scale or movement is going to push this overall sensation to, you know, create a different effect. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that I'm kind of like, well, what if I made it larger, or what if I made it smaller? You know, how does that affect the way that I understand the painting? So anyway, let me go back to my image here. The other thing is, like, I don't know if I want to go right into this particular reference. You know, it's like, what if there's a different slight variation to you know, some of these objects. Let me see if there's a way to share the folder that I have of my reference imagery. I'm trying to remember. I think I can do it like this. Let's go here. Here we go. So if I feel like there's just so many ways to share what I'm looking at as a reference today. Let's get rid of that. So if I just go through my folder, you can kind of get a sense of the different images that I'm looking at as potential reference material. If I enlarge this just for a few minutes here as I talk about these different ones. This is the one that I'm currently using as a reference for the painting, which you can easily see those commonalities between the shapes and the shadows and those things. And I already flipped most of these upside down because that's the way that the flower is going to be positioned in the painting. But even in things like this, it's like I kind of like how I might as well just make this larger over here so we can really see this. But what I was going to say is I really like maybe the fact that there's not quite so much information that's in shadow. There's a more there's like just more intensity with these jagged shapes in the leaves of the flower. This one is very like almost like blown out in terms of the lighting. So I don't know how much I'll reference this one. Maybe more for like some of the shapes and the anatomy. I think this is a really good reference. This one is probably too blurry to reference, but I like that it's sort of backlit, so that maybe can help inform the lighting in my painting. This is another one I think that's just really good for the anatomy. The lighting on this one I think is really dynamic and interesting. So I could see myself working from that one. And these are ones where I'm looking at the stem and trying to really understand the size and the orientation of these jagged edges and how I can maybe use those in the painting as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to looking at this one for now, but try not to get too locked into a particular reference while I'm working.
Alright, that could go on for a while. Experience the moment of Sentiva, available in Clorox Sentiva lavender scented bleach. Uses directed.
Okay.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But this one you need to hear. 16.5 billion. That's how much money in refunds the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now, here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. Oh, one last number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/Spotify for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
At Patrón, we craft our tequila using high-quality natural ingredients without additives, no sweeteners or extracts, no secrets. In fact, Patrón's secret ingredient is that we have no secret ingredients, just 100% additive-free tequila, made with 100% huevo de agave, water, and time. Patrón, 100% additive-free tequila. Visit patrontequila.com to learn more. The perfect words with your Patrón is responsibly copyright 2025 imported by Patrón Spirits Company, Corp.
So right now I want to make some of the changes to where the light is coming from. You know, it's like I kind of want to make this feel a little bit more backlit. So I'm going to darken, at the very least, the right side of the flower. I'm just using a brush tool to go over this as a way to bring down that contrast. And you know, that might even be a little too dark for the sake of the painting, but if I change the opacity, that can kind of level us back out more towards that middle range in value. So I'm just going to merge that with my layer with the flower. And now let's start to get into some of the greens. I think I might... Maybe I won't use that tool. Maybe I'll go back to a pencil for now. See, here I really like the way that the stem kind of mimics the curve of my ring and that pointer finger that's against my cheek. Like there's this really natural, continuous line that is forming there that I think is interesting for, you know, the way that we see a pathway into part of the painting. You know, that kind of leads us into the eyes, and then maybe from the eyes we can go over to some of these other areas. So, you know, when I'm teaching and I talk about visual pathways and we're thinking about composing, we have to try to look at aspects of our designs not as objective information where we can, agree that something looks like blank, and instead see everything as this, combination of parts that are abstract, right? Elements of abstraction, whether that's a line or a value or shape. When I look at this line, there's an actual line, and then there's this implied line that we have through the connecting of different parts. So those are the things that I'm kind of thinking about as I'm drawing and composing here. But I really like this particular reference here because it is a bit more backlit than the first one that I was working off of. And I think that's going to help me visualize the placement of certain pieces of the plant. So let's go in here. Just create an area for those spiky leaves. And then things are becoming a little bit more warm as we move to the left side over here. Okay. So then, things like this, like, do I want this corner to line up with my watch band? Probably not. I think that creates kind of a weird tangent in the painting. So it's like maybe I should have it curl a little bit more outward like this. And it's really windy outside today. Trying to think a little bit more about the edges between different textures in the reference here. And again, I don't really need to go like fully rendered in this digital design. I think this is more about finding the character and the language of the subject, and trying my best to consider different possibilities at this stage where it's really easy to make adjustments on an iPad as opposed to an oil painting. Okay, let's see. I think I can probably get rid of these darker edges over here. There's kind of a cooler light. Then the other thing I'll have to think about is that warm light source from the window and how that starts to change the feeling of the subject, kind of like I did on the portrait, which this isn't the best image of the painting, but if I zoom in, we can really see that warmness on the left side of the face compared to the right side of the face. So that'll be something probably towards the end of today's session that I'll start to think about. And I think what I might do is add a little bit of a coolness on this side over here. Let's
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But this one you need to hear. 16.5 billion. That's how much money in refunds the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now, here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. Oh, one last number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/Spotify for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. It feels like
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
Shopping with your parents can be amazing.
Why would they sell jeans with holes in them? I'm going to speak to the manager.
Mom!
that hoodie is giving. You should get it. YOLO.
Thanks to the Chase mobile app, your kid can shop independently while you keep an eye on their spending. So you can go from
We can be twinsies.
to
Mama shopping. So I stayed up late.
freedom for kids, control for parents. That's family banking from Chase.
Once I actually do work on this part of the painting, I think it'll be a lot of fun because of the amount of varying color shifts in these little like seed, strands of the flower. Okay, I do want to kind of like give myself a reminder that this has this like kind of flat top edge and effect. So if I bring in a couple of these smaller points, hopefully that can help give the impression that this is like a flatter surface on the top here. let's adjust a couple of the color properties here. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. And I kind of want to see what would happen if I desaturated it a bit. You know, versus like really bringing the chroma up. I probably wouldn't paint it that chromatic, but just to see it as an example, I think is interesting at this stage. But I think if it looks kind of like dull in color and it reads more like this dead plant, I think that would be, that would be more interesting than if it was really colorful. I wanted to have some color, like this was a recent cutting, but not like it just happened, you know, or that it's still alive. So I think somewhere around there would work well. Let's make this darker in here. Yeah, I think that's gonna work a lot better. What's a little bit strange is that the background in that area is very cool from the wall, and I think some of the leaves are going to end up getting lost, but honestly, maybe that's good. Maybe that's how it should be. It should feel like it's sort of dissolving into that environment a little bit more, like it's not quite as firm or secure. So I kind of want to try very gently erasing out some of this just to see what would happen. Kind of giving it a bit of a ghostly effect, I think would be interesting. Honestly, it probably would also help if I softened some of the edge on this front side too. Oh, excuse me. So, okay, I'm looking at my references here, and I just want to go through a few of the other ones and see if there's anything else I can use. I think in this one, I like those really spiky shapes on the stalk of the plant, so I'm going to see if I can bring some of that into this object still. Let's grab this. This is where I can probably start to introduce a little bit more of a warm orange type of temperature. Let's bring the size down. Let's make it a little bit more saturated. Might be a little bit too bright. Let's see. Let's bring that down just a little bit. also like how dark this purple flower is on the bottom left part of this picture, so I think I might bring some of that into the design as well. Let's see. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. And again, I think it all comes down to the relationships between the figure, the background, smaller elements and subjects, and
Shopping with your parents.
how those things start to feel connected or disconnected visually. So, when I look at this stem right now,
Your kid can shop
it's standing away from the hand, but it doesn't feel as sharp and jagged as the stems in this image that I'm looking at that's pulled up on screen right now. So I think those are the things where it's like, okay, I need to push that a little bit more and make it feel, more just like dangerous and sharp. So that's what I need to try to work on right now. So if I go back to this and maybe make it slightly more green.
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut.
If I really brighten that up, what does that start to look like? Might be a little too high contrast.
That's how much money in refunds the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now, here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. Oh, one last number. Save up to 40% in your first year. Visit lifelock.com/Spotify for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
One of the things I like about the way the flower looks in the painting is that I feel like it has a similar sense of character in the way that it's described. You know, like I feel like the intensity of the color fits sort of like the feeling and the intensity of the painting right now. Wasn't sure if my dog was down here. And that sense of lighting and like glowing effect, I think also really fits the feeling of the painting too. So I'm pretty happy with the way those things are starting to feel connected overall. And yeah, I think I just need to decide, like, okay, do I like the pose? Do I like the gesture? Do I like the way that it's sort of hanging downward? You know, should it be a little bit more curved in some area or way? I kind of like some of the drama in this type of curve here that, you know, maybe I'm not seeing in my painting at the moment. Some of them also have that like stocky, like straight sense of character too, though. So maybe for the character of the plant, it should be a little bit straighter. I love how just like thin the neck is on this one, and then just how round the flower like head bulb part of it ended up. Let's see if I get rid of this. Okay. I guess the other thing I should probably consider is if I want there to be like a back end to the plant and to the stalk, like on this other side of my hand, like does the material of this shape come out the other end, like over here somewhere?
Need inspiration? Shop Pick and Save for mouth-watering meals and appetizing ingredients. Our low prices add up to big savings. Plus over
You know, I don't know.
coupons each week. And up to $1
I don't know if that really fits.
At Pick and Save, you always get big flavors and big savings. Pick and Save, fresh for
It's like,
everyone.
or does it come up over here?
Great selection of digital coupons and use them up to 5 times in one transaction. Check our app for details. Pick and Save, fresh for everyone.
And if so, what I should do actually is put this on a different layer.
Don't look anyone in the eye. Don't smile. Stand right next to me. This is serious business.
But Dad,
I know, it's tough. But in the game of car buying,
And let's go
there are
to,
no games. CarMax has upfront pricing. The price we sell online is the price we get.
oh, okay. I guess we can smile.
Shop quality certified cars with upfront pricing at CarMax.com.
um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe that doesn't fit the mood of the painting. Like maybe it's better if there is no back end coming out from anywhere else. Like it sort of just stops in the hand. I think that's maybe a little bit more intriguing or mysterious. The other thing I kind of want to do is duplicate my thistle and see if I can maybe play with the form a little bit more. You know, it's like what happens if I do that. So here's the other one. It's not that big of a difference, I guess. The first one swoops down a little bit more, which I kind of like, so I'll probably keep the first one. Oops, and then I'm just gonna delete the second one. Some of these spikes are a little bit more of a purple color, so maybe once I'm done getting the value contrasts figured out here, maybe I'll go back with a warmer color to accent them. Let's also get back to this. Suppose I can delete this layer too. Might as well delete all of these other ones. Hmm. Go a little bit cooler. So does it make sense this way? This might actually help me draw things more accurately. Okay, let's see. Try something here.
Alright, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase of 16 weeks, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieve itch relief and clear or almost clear skin. And most of those people maintain skin that's still not clear 1 year with no
Okay.
50 milligram per 2 milliliter injection is
So
to treat adults and children 12
the thing I'm trying to figure out right now is
with moderate to severe eczema.
like the proportion and the angle of the flower, you know, where it's placed, what it's covering up, what it's next to. Those are things I'm trying to
Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe.
pay close attention to. And I think it would probably help to start to clean up some of these
Searching for real relief?
edges as well.
Visit ebglyss.lily.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Kind of wish I had one of these plants and I could just be drawing this from observation, because having to Frankenstein a few different references together so that it doesn't feel like I'm just copying a single one really isn't that enjoyable, and it's hard to tell if it's coming out looking as natural as it should. I'm just going to go in and cut through a bunch of the edge on this side. Just taking out some of the saturation again, bringing up the values a little bit. Because I think that's getting pretty close to what I have in mind. You know, I think I'll probably end up making some adjustments to things while I'm painting, but this can at least give me a good place to start. So I'm happy with this right now.
Breathe the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Time to restock your pantry? Pick and Save offers the same great prices and quality online that you get in store. From pasta to cook for family dinners to school lunch essentials. Get what you need when you shop, pickup, or delivery. If you're not 100% satisfied with your online order, we make it right. Guaranteed. Pick and Save. Fresh for everyone.
We've lowered prices. You can save 15% or more on hundreds of items like Thomas Mini Bagels, Campbell's SpaghettiOs, and more. Pick and Save. Fresh for everyone.
Some people just know they can save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the GPS directions first before driving to the mall.
Turn right at the left. In 1,000 miles, you will reach Montreal.
Not Montreal, the mall.
Recalculating. 6,000 miles to Nepal.
No, the mall.
Checking first is smart.
Calculating.
So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Okay, I think I'm getting pretty close to being done with the sketch today. Ideally, I'll be able to start working on this in the painting tomorrow. One of the mistakes I kind of made yesterday when I was building the frame is that I brought the painting out into the garage, and most of the time that I had it out there, I was pretty good at not letting dust and, little particles of wood shavings end up in the painting. And then this morning when I was looking at it, I could see little specks of things. So, some areas of the painting are still wet, especially where I had glazed and oiled out that middle figure, like in this part of the painting. So I definitely will have to make sure that it's dry all the way before I can take like a lightly damp paper towel to wipe off any dust that might be on the surface. And then hopefully where the hand, area is tomorrow, I think I'll be able to, wipe out some of those zones as well. But some of that I think is still a little bit sticky from past glazes. Those are the challenges when you're building frames, but I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. Thank you to everybody who popped in throughout this brief session. Hopefully, this gives you a good sense of my process and the way that I approach, designing something, conceptualizing a new part of a painting, and this will help fill in the blanks before I start working on the actual painting, just to show how I got to this point. I'm really excited for where this painting is headed, and like I've been saying, I'm really glad that I decided to share the process here on YouTube with folks. I hope you enjoyed watching today's digital session. It's also really great to see how easy it is for me to use the iPad when I'm streaming, so I'll probably do that again. But that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next live stream, and take care.